and welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. We're going to create the adventure of your lifetime today. And in all seriousness, I want to open with this because I think it's important. If you have somebody who knows somebody or related to somebody who has suffered domestic abuse, abuse by somebody that is a narcissist, I want you to stop and go give them a call and tell them to listen to this show, because this show is going to be one of the more impactful shows that affects many people. And our guest today has written a book. She has lived a narcissist life experience from a not such a great guy, but I haven't met him, so I can't say. But her name her name is Dana Diaz, and she's written the book "Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse." And Dana's with me, and I got her for the whole hour. I made her stay because this is one of those topics that you just can't do in 5 minutes. It takes, it takes a while to get through it, and to understand where we're going with it and stuff. So, Dana, thank you for coming. I really appreciate you being here.
It is my absolute pleasure. I am so happy to be here, and I'm so happy to be able to share my experience just so other people that have been in the circumstance or maybe are in the circumstance could see it a little differently than from the way they are experiencing now, because we all know what abuse is, and we all, I think, look around and really in the world, if you're not walking around with like the black eyes and any visible sign of something going on, people don't really take it seriously. There is something very real about narcissistic abuse that makes it abuse, and it's visible, and it's not something that people might always
Uh-oh.
go on, and even victims.
Uh-oh. Are you back? Dana? Oh no. Dana? Yo, Dana.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Hmm.
Are you having weather problems where you are? Dana?
All right, I'm
Dana.
here. Can you hear me?
I can, but you're frozen. Do you want to try and close it out and come back? And testing 1, 2, 3.
Let's try.
You're back.
I'm back. I am on my phone though, because apparently the computer didn't want to cooperate today.
It said no.
So I apologize. I just have to. Here, let me do this.
No, we're good. We're good. That's
I just want to put this down so I'm not holding it like a selfie. There we go. You can see me and hear me. So, okay.
Yep. And we are, the wonderful thing about doing a recording is that we can go ahead and start again.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. And we're good this time. My phone won't let up on me. That I know.
Oh, and by the way, Dr. Marnie Hill Fodoreo just commented for you.
Oh.
Dana, I just finished reading your amazing book, Grasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. So many of us who've had experienced this can relate to your writing. Glad you found your voice.
Oh, that's so cool. I love that. It makes me sad though. I never know how exactly to respond when people are, giving praise to the fact that, I wrote the book because they can relate. Because it's like, I'm sad. I don't want people to understand what this is. And, but I'm glad that they found somebody out there because that understands what it is, because unless you are in that situation, you just really can't grasp what it feels like to be a victim of it.
And she can, and which is great. You've come back strong. She says, great patience with the technical challenges. Now we can really hear her voice, which is why we're here, my friend. So
Exactly.
So why don't we begin again? And this way, we can put it all together. It'll sound just smashing.
Perfect.
Okay, so hold on. Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to Positive Talk, everybody. I hope that everybody's well today. It's a beautiful day. At least I hope it's a beautiful day inside where you are, if not outside. And I wanted to take a moment before we begin our interview. I wanted to talk to you specifically about if you know somebody who has gone through physical abuse, narcissistic abuse, has had those challenges in their life. We have somebody who's written a very, very important book, and we're going to be talking to her in just a second. But I want you to have the opportunity to go call somebody. If you need to talk, if you know somebody who's gone through it, is going through it, or you're scared that somebody's going through it and you're not sure, give them a call and have them listen to this episode in its entirety. It'll also be up on the archives of the Brushwood Media Network. And so I'm hopeful that you will take the time to do that, because our guest for this hour, I've interviewed her before. She is a delightful human being, and we've become really pretty good friends, I'd like to say. because I really feel for all the things that she's gone through, and we're going to talk about that quite a little bit. Her name is Dana Diaz. She's written the book "Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse." And Dana, thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. I'm so glad to be on this show again with you, and just glad that we're getting the word out there and just reaching the people that need to hear my story and hear about the experience, because unless you have been in it, you just have no concept of what it's like, to be in a situation with a narcissist. And I think what makes it worse is that society as a whole doesn't really recognize anything as abuse unless you're walking around with a black eye and kind of withdrawn and keeping to yourself. But so many times there's so much more going on, the financial abuse, the legal abuse, the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse, which actually emotional abuse is the most common form of abuse. But how do you prove it? How do you see it? So it's something very real that unfortunately too many people can connect with and relate to. So I hope that we'll reach some of those people today.
Well, and we do have a listener that I wanted to highlight what she said, because I think it's important going into this, which is Dr. Marnie says, Dana, I just finished reading your amazing book, Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. So many of us have experienced this and can relate to your writing. Glad you found your voice. Dr. Marnie, thank you so much. She's been a friend of the show for a long time, and she really is a talented lady in her own right. And I'm so glad that your book, and I got to ask you, does it make your heart warm, even though the subject matter is tough? Does it make your heart warm that somebody can pick up your book and it can have a life-changing impact on them?
It absolutely does, because that was the whole purpose. Of course, when I put the book out, the reaction from people who knew me and knew us was, oh, it's just a scorned wife, a vengeful act. And it's like, no, it's so much more than that. I had said from day one, I just want to reach that one person. Because when I had initially come out of my situation, I listened to my first podcast ever. I'd never listened to any podcast before. And it was a podcast about narcissistic abuse in which a woman told her story. And every word that came out of my mouth, I was like, yes, yes, yes. It's like we were married to the same person and lived the same exact life. And I didn't realize, because my ex, in typical narcissistic fashion, had isolated me from friends and family, took me 90 miles outside of city and suburbs into a podunk town where there was nothing and nobody. He didn't let me go out. He didn't like me on the internet. I didn't even have a smartphone until after our marriage was over. So, I had no connection to the outside world, as everybody else might experience it. So it was just baffling to me that somebody could have such an eerie, it was just so strange to hear somebody have the same experience as me. But I thought that's why it's important, because we all learn in different ways. Me never having heard a podcast before might not have heard that, but I could go to the library and get a book. And other people might know somebody that they can talk to, whatever it is. But I think however it is you reach those people, gosh, my life would have been so different if I had listened to that podcast a year earlier, 2 years earlier, even. It would have saved me possibly from the medical issues that I suffered from as a result of the narcissistic abuse. So it's just, however we can get the word out, it means so much. But yeah, it's a weird thing when people say that they can relate to it, because I don't want anyone to relate to it.
Well, I want you to tell us the definition of narcissism and how it presents itself to somebody, especially a significant other or they're dating or something, because it all starts eventually. You at one point you didn't know this guy, and then you started dating him, and I didn't know, were there signs, was there something
Right.
that you missed? Narcissism is, I think, a character flaw. Well, yeah, of course it's a character flaw. But what, describe it for us?
Well, let's go back to the origin of it. I'll give as quick and simple of an explanation. Narcissus was a Greek god who liked to look at his reflection in the water because he was so in love with the way he looked. So that's not a bad thing. We all like a healthy self-esteem, and we know, we see these people on social media taking the selfies in bikinis and with their six packs and whatever. They look as good as they think they do. We cannot hate on them. Most of them are lovely people. There's nothing wrong. They're not harming anybody. They just like the way they look. Now, how this has transformed into what we call narcissistic abuse is what narcissists that abuse people have in common are that they don't think, it's almost the exact opposite. They don't think very well of themselves. They have a deep-seated insecurity that they are not enough or they are not important. So they seek to have other people reflect back to them, sort of uplift them to that level of importance and superiority. They want to be held in regard. So it's kind of a backwards thing how it's gone from I like the way I look to I think I'm ugly inside and I need you to show me that I'm better than what I think I am. Where it goes wrong is that when they use the abuse. And let me define narcissistic abuse just so people understand what I'm talking about. It's simply when a narcissist abuses you. So it's not a one type of actual abuse. It is physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, legal abuse, emotional abuse, the gaslighting, manipulation. They are seeking to dominate and control you and basically be the only influence on you. They're basically trying to trap you in a little cage and put you in a little box so that everything in your world revolves around them, because then they feel important.
Wow. I have a six-pack, but I have to go to the store to get it.
I'm sure you have one in there somewhere.
Well, we won't go there. But so basically, when the way a narcissist presents themselves, they present themselves to the public as being confident, assertive, have it all together. But deep down in their own brain and their own mind, they're less than. They need to control somebody in order to feel more so that they can feel good about themselves.
That is one type of narcissist, and that is, you just described my stepfather. These are the very overt personalities that are going to tell you all the stuff that, look at everything I have, look at how cool I am, I'm smarter, I know everything, I this, I that. They are braggarts. They are the people that are driving the status symbol cars and live in big showy houses. They need people to see them as more important as they are. Now, there's another type of narcissism called covert narcissism, hidden narcissism. That was my ex. So now this is kind of an opposite personality, where I always said he reminded me of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh, always with the slumped shoulders and the bowed head, like nothing good ever happens. Of course, this sucky thing would happen to me and I'll never this. So it kind of baited me into, no, you're great. No, you're fabulous. You will get there. I was the cheerleader pumping him up, but then it went from little, encouragements to, yes, him feeling like he had to control and completely dominate me and instill fear in me with all these other things he was doing so that I would never leave and so that I would continue to admire and praise and exalt him so that he could feel the esteem that he didn't feel on his own.
So the second one that was your ex-husband is actually more devastating than the first one.
Yes, because that's the strange thing is that at least with my stepfather, I mean, I'll be honest with you, I can't tell you how many people have met him and, you know, had their comments, but he's just an outright ass. I'm just going to say it. Whereas with my ex, it came off so humble and so, I mean, I remember at one point, and I actually talked about this in the book, at one of our very low points in our marriage, I looked at him and thought, oh my gosh, he's just this sad little boy. Like I saw that inner child just wanting love, just like I did. Like it was strange. But what I have found, which is interesting, is when you do have something in your childhood, whether it was emotional neglect or, you know, physical abuse or whatever it was, sometimes kids that have a bad childhood grow up to be abusers themselves. And some of those kids turn out to be codependents, you know, basically appeasing everybody and just trying to keep the peace and keep everything okay. And what I realized in that moment when I saw that inner child, that little boy in him coming out, I realized, oh my gosh, we both came from something, different family systems, but where we both felt something wasn't good. But he turned into that abuser and I turned into that other one that was all empathetic and, you know, no, everything will be okay. I'm going to fix everything so everybody's happy again. And so it was kind of strange to realize that, you know, but I'm glad that I picked, you know, the path that I did, because I could never imagine myself making anybody feel even the slightest bit of what I felt like when I was a child or in my adult life for that matter.
So did you feel like you should, you know, like take care of him? And because he was, woe is me and stuff, and oh, and you were the cheerleader, and it's kind of like you were being his mommy kind of thing. And then
Yeah.
the roles reversed at one point when he got nasty.
Well, the thing is, he was nasty from the beginning. The first time I met him, the alarms were going off. I mean, I literally remember like the robot from Lost in Space, like danger, 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 swinging his little coily arms around. Yeah,
Danger,
exactly.
Danger.
That is literally the image I had when I met him in my head. I just saw the arms swinging around like, don't do it, Dana. But the problem is it caught me off guard. So it's not that I didn't see the signs. It's not like I didn't have a gut instinct telling me, oh no, this is all wrong. He was aloof. He felt entitled. There was something about him wanting servitude, and I was not trying to give that to anybody. Nobody was ever going to treat me like that again. But that was the thing. He kind of like faked this, you know, arrogance, because he wasn't arrogant at all. And I think that's why I fell for it, because at least in my childhood, like I said, I mean, my stepfather he still is who he is, and he doesn't even try to hide it. Whereas my ex, he could be a lovely human being. I mean, the person that he was to everybody else, charming, funny, humble, charitable, generous with his time and everything, he could be that way. I mean, it's not like I saw Chucky on the street running around with a butcher knife and thought, hey, baby, let me come after you. I mean, he had very appealing qualities, but then he didn't. You know, it was, I mean, I never really knew what a love-hate relationship was until him, because he either loved me, and he loved me a lot. I mean, as far as like what it seemed to be. But when he didn't like something I said, if he didn't like the way I looked, as far as like I gave him a look, if he didn't like something I did, if just any kind of disapproval, I was met with very hateful reactions to that. And it started little. it was, the first thing was something flying across the room at my head. Well, to somebody that grew up in a nice house with two loving parents that gave them a sense of self-esteem and all that other nice, happy stuff, that would have been crossing the line. To somebody like me, who watched my mother enable, excuse, and tolerate physical abuse and verbal abuse and financial abuse, I was like, oh, it's not so bad. Maybe he had a bad day. And that sounds ridiculous to some people, but it's just what it was. I was young. I just wanted somebody to love me, and he loved me sometimes. It's just other times he didn't. And that was something that I didn't have even in my childhood. I had no love at all. So I was starving for those little bits, those little crumbs. They were enough for me. But what happened, and this is what happens in all narcissistic relationships, when they have crossed, and they have a moral compass, they know when they're crossing a line. But when they have crossed a line and they know they've gotten away with it, then the next time something happens, they're crossing that line a little more. So somebody like me that lacked boundaries, I still had boundaries out there somewhere, but he kept pushing the bounds further to test me, to see how far he could go to get away with all these things before I would put my foot down. And there were times where I said, this isn't right. I expect you to treat me better. You don't get to talk to me that way. I stood up for myself sometimes, but that would be met with maybe 3 days of silence, complete silent treatment. Or maybe a door would come off its hinges because he would tear it off in anger. Or maybe holes would be punched in the walls and I'd have to call somebody, when we lived in the apartments, call the maintenance guys and be embarrassed that, this hole was in the wall and what was going on. But the problem is that from point A to point B, when the first thing that happened was having a CD, thrown across the room at my head, to at the very end, we've got guns and knives involved. This is a very serious situation.
Well, first thing I'd like to say is I'm glad he either had bad aim or that you could duck real quick.
Well, yeah, it was probably a combination of all of that.
But the more you got into it, the more down that rabbit hole you went, the farther you went. And then he started, like you said, he moved you away from family and friends. You weren't able to talk to anybody. He isolated you, and it all. Do you think, in looking back at it, that was part of his plan the whole time? Or
100%.
So
100%.
I was having a conversation with somebody today, and I was like, I don't know. I don't get it, because for me, it doesn't work. I don't get how some people plan a whole idea around how they're going to go get somebody and how they're going to manipulate somebody and move somebody in the right. That to me, that's way too much work. I can't do that, but there are people who love to do that, apparently.
Well, and here's the kicker of it, is what you just said is exactly why we've all heard of this idea in relationships of, if I can't have you, nobody else can have you. That is narcissism 101, because after they've put all their effort into securing you, training you, keeping you, they are not trying to go out there and do that with somebody else. And you cannot leave them. And that's the thing, is that this is where all these abuses come into play. So let me take a step back too, because you did comment on this earlier. So the thing about narcissists also, they actually call a victim. So I was my ex-husband's narcissistic supply. I felt like I was preyed upon, but supply, meaning you are providing them some sort of resource. Typically, it's to boost their ego, however it is, whether they feel so great about themselves that they could dominate you and control you and overpower you. But I remember for me early on, it was my, like, when he met me and just, in the superficial interactions, I feel very strongly that he had ideas about what he wanted in his life. He was very young, but he was very eager to own a home, buy a boat, just all this stuff, but he couldn't do it. And I know he felt a certain way about he didn't make enough money. He didn't have the resources and the abilities. So here I was, getting my college degree, showing a very promising future in writing or broadcasting or something in the city of Chicago, which is a big market. And I think he pounced on that opportunity. And and here's the funnier part of it, he also saw when he met my stepdad, here's my stepdad saying, oh, look at how big my house is. And I have a Harley and I have a Corvette. And he's one of those that has to tell everybody about all this stuff that he has. I think that I definitely 100% looking back, feel like he saw me as his way to have the things that he wouldn't be able to have in his life on his own, the material things, the money, the stuff, the house, all that. Because even when he proposed to me, it was immediately after he proposed, he pulled me away from family and said, well, we're not getting married until we buy a house. And I had incidentally just graduated from college and just gotten a big promotion at work and was making a pretty decent salary that was twice his. So I think that's why he proposed to me, because I could now be his opportunity to buy that house that he wanted. But he held it over my head in true narcissistic fashion. If I get what I want, then I'll give you what you want.
Now, do you suppose that part of that was, by the way, if you're looking at this and this is audio only, I can tell you that Dana is a very attractive woman. And she was in media and did some stuff in Chicago. And was the fact that you are very attractive and would make a great trophy wife, if you will, do you think that was part of it?
I do. And I feel terrible, like conceited saying that, because I've always had a very skewed self-image because of things in my childhood with my mother and stepfather always making me feel not like that. But I know that my ex felt that I was very attractive. And there were times where I did feel like I was just there so he looked good, like, look what I got. And just from comments he would make to other people when he was introducing me to his friends and introducing me to family. And, the fact that I was educated and like I said, came from this family that maybe had a few things, it didn't hurt. It all made him look really, really good.
And I'm willing to bet that when he would introduce you to like his college buddies or high school buddies, and they would, rib him and kid him and say, boy, did you marry up? Look at you. You're rising above your station and all that kind of stuff, because that's how guys sometimes, that's how guys think, that's how they treat each other, which is a shame, because you were the beneficiary of his anger whenever that would happen, I would imagine.
Exactly. That was exactly it. But you're exactly right. And I mean, this is kind of going off on a little tangent, but the funny thing is that he never said many nice things to me. The only thing I could honestly say, he always called me his beautiful wife. And even after we divorced, he sent me a lot of stuff in text and emails, but everything was, well, I used to have a beautiful wife and you took that away from me. I
Right.
used to have, and it was just like, but I'm a human being. I'm more than, this thing that we call my face and all that stuff that if you think it's pretty, that's great. And thank you. But it goes away. I need somebody to love me for who I am inside and to, it sounds terrible. We want to be attractive to our spouses, but when all our spouses see us as is a physical, like eye candy, it doesn't feel good. It's not a compliment at that point.
No, for you, that's not a good thing. And for them, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but as we get older, we all age a little bit. And and gravity takes hold, and there's some things that we may have used to be that we're no longer that, and stuff. And a lot of these guys will then leave their wife of however long to go after that younger, sportier model, if you will. Do you think that also has a narcissistic component to it?
Well, narcissists, it doesn't matter what you look like. You could be queen of the universe and win all the beauty pageants, and they're still going to cheat. It is a very common trait in narcissism. My ex was no exception. Even, shortly after I moved in with him, because he had me moved in with him within 6 weeks of meeting him, I believe. And within a few months, I was kind of noticing things. There were girls calling the house, and he always had an excuse. There was always a reason. And then he was disappearing with women, but it's like he was hiding it, but he wasn't. It's like he wanted me to know he was with other women. And then there were times, and I talk about this in the book, and there were many times, for example, he went out with a friend and he came back and made sure to tell me, woke me up in the middle of the night to tell me that he made out with this one woman and they were talking for hours, but don't worry, I didn't sleep with her, and another time it was, it was just, it's like he wanted me to know, like I had something, like I needed to be told what I had so that I appreciated it. And at one point, he even told me, and I'll never forget this, he told me the next time he gets married, it's going to be with somebody who is unattractive and overweight because she'll appreciate what she has more than I do, because I apparently was ungrateful for, the privilege of being his wife. And honestly, I was just, when somebody says that, what do you... At that point, I was just like, please go find that person. Like I literally remember telling people that I did talk to, at work or whatever, like, I want to be one of those wives that like goes and does speed dating at a bar to find him his next wife. Cause I'm done with it. I want to give my position away. He cheated on me so many times that I even remember the last time he waltzed in the house a day after he had left, and I didn't even ask him where he was, who he'd slept with, where he'd slept. I didn't care. It wasn't me, so I didn't care. But it's disgusting that they use that, as part of their way of manipulating you. Or maybe, because I certainly in the beginning felt like, am I not pretty enough? Am I not skinny enough? Am I doing something wrong in our intimate and, you start, but that's the thing, that's what they do to you. And it's not just with regard to your sexuality or your appearance. It's with everything in life. You start questioning everything that way.
What's that old joke that, I don't know how old it is, but it's always better to marry an ugly woman, because if you marry a pretty woman and she leaves you, well, then you'll be sad. If she's ugly, it doesn't matter. So that's not true, but that's a terrible joke.
That's terrible.
I'm sorry I said that. I'll pray for forgiveness later. But
okay.
But
I'm Catholic too. I get it.
We're talking with Dana S. Diaz, and she's written the book Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. We need to take a break, But when we come back, we're going to talk more about, I guess, the darker days when it,
Okay.
'cause it went down, it went down, it went down until at one point you had the ability and the courage to fight back. And that's the overriding lesson that we want to everybody to get, is that there is a better way. You can fight back. You can get out of wherever you are, but it takes a bit. So we'll be right back. Again, Dana Diaz is our guest. You're listening to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald, and we'll be back in just about a minute 10.
You're listening to Brushwood Media Network, the best in syndicated talk, news, and entertainment shows.
They have your eyes. They have your ears. They have your smile. Now all they need is a little more of your time. Make a difference in your child's life, because anyone can be a father. It takes time to be a dad.
And welcome back to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. And I told you that would just take a minute 10, but I wasn't bad at all. And we're talking with Dana Diaz, and it's important for us to get as much time with you as possible because your story is so impactful and it can help people so much that maybe, because there are people that are out there that will be listening to this going, when did she move into my house? Because that's exactly what's going on in my world and stuff. So we're continuing to talk about that again. The book is Gasping for Air: The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. When did the book come out, by the way?
It came out last year in June on my ex's birthday. And yes, that was a pointed decision on my part because it was my rebirthday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's pretty awesome. Like, here, I wrote this for you. Take it. And that's pretty cool. And how's it doing? It's been doing well, I understand.
It's been doing very well. And again, that's a weird thing for me because, I mean, we always want to have success in whatever we do in life, but because of the subject matter, it makes me sad. The average book sells 250 copies. That's hard to believe. Mine has sold, I think we're over the 2,000 mark already. And it's in a couple of libraries. But I think what's really made me happy is that not just that people are reaching out and saying, I read your book and it gave me the strength to leave that relationship or whatever it is. I have had mental health professionals contact me, I mean, many of them, and say thank you, because these people that they're trying to help don't even understand, really even what they're feeling in those circumstances, because they're so clouded with, trying to process everything that they're dealing with, that even if they do reach out for help, they have a hard time sharing everything or trusting a professional to really get where they're coming from. So, the book is giving a perspective on that and giving professionals the ability to help victims better. So that to me has been the most rewarding part of it.
Well, and it's a huge piece of it because, as you can attest, and it's in your book, when you went down this rabbit hole, there was a point to where you didn't think that you could get out. And it went from throwing a CD at you to knives and guns and full-blown
domestic violence. Yeah. He wanted me dead. And it's a very scary thing when somebody has threatened your life.
Now, when he said that, was it like, if I can't have you, nobody can have you kind of thing? Is that kind of how he presented it?
So there were a few different ways. There was a text message that was sort of in that realm, just kind of, it was more, I forget the exact words, but it was more of, I'm not going to live without you, kind of going that direction. But then there was also an email that said, this will be easier if one of us just died. And then there was finding out from my neighbor that he had been over there. They were having a barbecue or something, and they were up all night at the fire pit, having a bonfire. And he told them, all of them, because he was drunk and forgot that he probably shouldn't say this out loud, that he was planning to kill me. And he tried. And that it's scary, and the scariest part is that even to this day, after everything that has happened, and I have police reports, we've been to court because I was trying to get an order of protection, and, even having my neighbors as witnesses and just all these things, there are still people that don't believe me because he would never do that. He would never say that. I'm crazy. I'm the one that there's something wrong with. And that is not the case. I don't care if I was crazy. The man threatened my life, and I have it in writing. I have 2 incidents of domestic violence where he did try to, do away with me. And it's even now, it's been 3 years and 4 months since that last incident. It is still a little scary. I mean, it's getting easier, but don't think I'm not still looking over my shoulder. It makes me nervous to know he's out in the world, because you don't forget when somebody wants to kill you.
No. Well, there's also, and I don't know if I don't think we've talked about this, but there's also PTSD that can be really prevalent some people would say, oh, this is my public service announcement. Some people would say that PTSD is like a wartime thing. If you're a military person and you're coming back, it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody at any time who feel that whatever they've gone through, they feel is very devastating to them. So I would encourage you, if you are in that boat, if you feel like you are that person, there's a number that you can call. It's 988. And you can call that number. And also, if you are feeling like you're suffering from domestic abuse, you can call 988, and they will put you in touch with people who can help you and walk you through getting out of a situation or whatever. And if you're in the military, and you can call 988 and just hit 1 after that, and you'll be hooked up to somebody who's in the military who can help you, because the suicide is far too prevalent, and we need to knock that stuff off, because there are people that need to be here. So okay, I'm good with that. But 988, that's the number that people can call. And so I want to so in talking to what you went through, when was the day that you felt like you had to leave, and how did that come about, and what did you do?
It's funny because I always knew our marriage wouldn't last. And even a few years, I want to say it was about 5 years into our marriage, I was about done. But I stayed because I made a vow, and we had a child. And what makes me sad, when I wrote my book, I'm even at a loss for words, because it's still astounding to me that, I didn't leave when he swung a crowbar at my head. I didn't leave when we had a prescription medication situation where he drugged me into the bathroom and left me there, hoping that I would die and hoping that it would look like I did it to myself. There were so many things I could go on and on that would have alarmed any other human being and made them walk out, just take their kid and leave. But I stayed. It was towards the end of our 25 years, I had become very, very ill, and it was inexplicable because I was otherwise quite healthy. I've always been that weirdo. I mean, even since junior high, I was always like eating my apples for lunch and hard-boiled eggs and high protein and working out. And I coached cross country for 9 years. Like I should have been healthy. for no reason whatsoever. Within a 2-week period, I had all these random symptoms, about 24 random symptoms just come out of nowhere. And I'm talking about everything from, like, I had a sore throat that it actually never went away for 3 years, by the way, to my hands would go numb, to urinary frequency. I was peeing like 20 times an hour. Sorry for the TMI, but like, people need to understand, these weren't just like, oh, my eye is twitching or something. This was like, none of this seemed related. I was blacking out constantly. My muscles were stiffening. Like, I mean, I couldn't sit down more than 10 minutes. I would have to even stand in place, moving side to side, because I could not be still. So many things. But the one that scared me the most was that in that 2-week period, I dropped down to 93 pounds. I've always been short. Yeah, I've always been fairly small, but that was almost, what was that, a 15 to 20 pound drop in 2 weeks. No 40-some-year-old woman should be 93 pounds. I think, 9-year-olds are 93 pounds. I don't know, but it wasn't healthy. It wasn't, there's no reason for it. So I went to doctor after doctor after doctor. Most of them threw their arms up, said, I have no idea. It could be your thyroid. It could be adrenals. It could be this. It could be that. It could just be anxiety. I was like, yeah, I have a little of that. But I would be sent to specialists because I was also having cardiovascular stuff and neurological stuff and, digestive. I've been to every specialist. I had so many tests. Literally, I could probably write a whole book on all the tests that I've been through. It finally took a sleep neurologist, who would have thought, and a functional medicine doctor to figure out that they needed to get me with Mayo Clinic and get me a cortisol test. Cortisol is a stress hormone. They say it's common in abuse victims when you're in fight or flight mode. They actually say it's like if you were being chased by a lion, as if any of us ever are or were, but I guess that's what it would feel like, the rush in your body, sort of like adrenaline, but it's cortisol. Well, your levels of cortisol should be between 1 and 600 at any given time throughout the day. They test each test. They take your sample 5 times throughout the day. Mayo Clinic called and said, well, we think we compromised the labs because there's no way they're this high. We have to retest you. Retested, guess what? My levels were consistently over 2,500, over 4 times what they should be at their highest. And they said I had been living in fight or flight for so many years, decades, that my white blood cells thought that I had like a cancer or a virus or something major to eradicate, that they killed themselves off. So all these random symptoms were autoimmune reactions. I was autoimmune. And I love this part. I developed a rare lung syndrome that's called upper airway resistance syndrome. It is considered a sleeping disorder, but it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at the same time. Strange, but it also explains all the very seemingly unrelated issues I was having. It is also, ironically, very, very common in victims of abuse. Who would have thought? So
it's the stress level.
Yeah, exactly. It's the stress. And so that was the funny thing, is I remember the doctor sitting me down because he said, your organ systems have shut down. Like, your body is literally doing everything it can to keep your lungs going and keep your heart beating. I ended up with a backpack oxygen machine and a mask on my face just to get through every day to keep my oxygen levels up above 83%. COVID was 93%. My levels were going down to 83%. So I was struggling. I was getting fevers. I couldn't see straight half the time. My vision was like, everything was dysfunctioning because my body just wasn't working right. I mean, I was not breathing enough to allow for my muscles to work or my heart or anything. So my doctor says to me, well, whatever it is causing you so much stress, and he did use the word stress, you need to just get rid of it. Because he says, I can't give you a pill. There's no surgery. You need to make whatever lifestyle change you need to make. Well, I went home that night thinking, oh, my stress is my husband. My stress is, it was also my mother and my stepfather. But unfortunately, we understand what toxic relationships are, but this was a big deal. You're talking about the three primary people, in anybody's life, your parents and your husband. But I just laid down on the couch that night. I slept on a couch in the basement for a while, for a long time at the end, because I didn't trust sleeping in the same bed next to him. But I remember asking myself that night, what do I want? Because this isn't it. I don't want to die. I don't want to live like this either. And I know the answer. I know the answer is getting that divorce that I've been trying not to get, because my son asked me not to divorce his dad until he left for college, because he had actually told me when he was 14, please don't leave dad before I leave for college, because he's going to make life a living hell. Well, it was my health. And I love my son, and I don't go back on my promises usually, but I had to start fighting for me. And I didn't love myself, obviously, but I still had obviously a little sense of self-respect left in there, that I respected my life enough to want to keep living it. And so that's when I kind of saw, in asking myself what I wanted, I saw what I really did want in life. Like, I did want to be married, but I wanted to be married to somebody that, didn't want me dead at the least. I can laugh about it now, but let's be real. I mean, I wasn't asking for much. I wanted to be able to, use my degree in journalism. I wanted to be I always had wanted to help victims of abuse in some way. So like, there were things I wanted in life, and I was never going to have those things fulfilled if I was gone. I was never going to see my son grow up if I was gone. And I was, honestly, I'd be damned if I was going to die and leave that guy to raise our son. That was not going to happen. So I made the effort. I was just like, this is not going to take me down. As weak as I was, I still ran 5 miles every morning, and I fought for my health. I fought for my, safety more than anything, by trying to get that order of protection, getting the necessary steps in order to be able to file for divorce. And I eventually did. And like I said, we've mentioned it, but I had 2 domestic violent incidences after the divorce, because he was not going to just let me go that easily. But I came out of it, and my son and I are doing very, very well. And we're just leaving it in the past.
Well, your son, I can understand that's even adding more stress.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have done him any good if you had stayed and were dead. So you did the right thing. And I'm glad that you guys are doing well. And as a postscript, you're also remarried and to a lovely man, from what I know. Yeah. Well, I don't know if he'd call himself lovely, but I would say he's a good dude. How about that?
He is a good dude. I've known his family almost 20 years. I guess there was one benefit of my ex moving me out to this small podunk town where everybody knows everybody. So even though the last thing I ever thought I was going to do was get married again, I'm so glad that I gave it a shot, because I will say this, I'm not advising everybody to run out and get married after you get out of an abusive relationship, but it certainly helped during the healing process that, I was learning all these tools, and, when you're in, having a stop and breathe and think about, we can read it, we can hear it, we can watch YouTube videos now, how to heal ourselves and all the tools and techniques. But until you're actually in those situations and getting triggered, because yes, post-traumatic stress is actually a very common diagnosis after narcissistic abuse or any abuse. And, strangely, I will add on a little tangent. I did speak at length to a male military veteran who was a victim of narcissistic abuse. He got put through the ringer, but he looked at me and he said, "It's kind of like warfare, this narcissistic abuse." I said, it absolutely is. It feels like a war. And I told him I always felt like, they call it walking on eggshells when you're in this situation, treading lightly. I said, I felt like I was in a damn minefield because everywhere I stepped, something was blowing up. It was just, and I didn't have time to process one thing before another one hit. So yeah, there were a lot of triggers. There was a lot of hypervigilance and worry and anxiety after the fact. But being able, particularly in a romantic situation, but with any human being, to have somebody that gave me a safe space that I knew they weren't going to judge me, abandon me. There was nothing negative that could come back on me to make me feel ashamed for what I was feeling and what I was going through, to be able to practice those tools and until I got them right, until I was able to go through those situations where I might have been in fetal position crying in the corner for a day or two after something might trigger me, to where now I can just be like, that recalls a little memory there, but we're just going to brush that off. But if I didn't have him there to give me that safe place, because this world is so full of stigma and judgment, and I mean, there's still even people that, oh, she's crazy. She's crazy. Yeah, I'm a little nuts, but I call it spicy, whatever. But aren't we all? We all have our quirks. But what I went through does not make me crazy. What I went through affected me just like a man going out to war. Not that I have any disrespect. What I went through was nothing in comparison to our veterans, and I appreciate them. But it absolutely is traumatizing. That does not mean people are crazy. And that's something I want, people to understand too, because I think there's so much shame that victims carry that they don't reach out for help, and they're afraid to speak up because they think there's something wrong with them. But I'm here to tell you very firmly, if you are in a situation and you can relate to this, there is nothing wrong with you. Is your mental health suffering? Yeah, probably. And probably your physical health too. But it's okay. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are not damaged. You are affected by another human being. But the shame that you're feeling is their shame. It is not yours. The people that are abusing are the ones who should feel ashamed. And they are the ones that are carrying unhealed trauma within themselves that they refuse to take accountability for, and they refuse to deal with. So they are putting it on you, just like my ex and my mother and my stepfather put it on me. And once you can understand that about yourself and release that shame, because I'm going to tell you right now, I don't feel shame at all. Obviously, I'm being very outspoken about my experience because I am realizing they're the ones that should be ashamed. They burdened me with what they could not deal with themselves. I never asked to be that strong. I never wanted to be that strong. I would have rather been weak and loved than strong and unloved. But you know what? Now that I know where the shame lies, it's not on me. I released it. That is where I could begin healing.
And that is an important part. I did want to mention one thing, and that is, if you get out of a relationship like that, you go see somebody, a coach or somebody to work with, because the last thing that you want to do is to fall into another person's trap of the same thing that you just left, not knowing that that's the trap that you're going into, but you haven't done the work on yourself to be able to recognize it so that those things don't happen anymore, and you can really change who you are and what's it about. And then you can know your greatness, which is my favorite line in the world these days, because you can know your greatness. Think about what you did, how much you've accomplished in 3 years, 3.5 years. You've written a book. You've changed your life around. You and your son are having a great time. You married a good guy who isn't in the same thing of what that other guy was doing. So you've changed everything about yourself, and that takes a lot of work, takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of bravery, and you should be really, really proud of your greatness, and knowing what you've accomplished is going to help a lot of people that are that are maybe currently in your position that you were. And Gasping for Air is the name of the book. The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. I highly recommend you get the book. Leave it on, leave it on your counter, or your in the middle of the living room, and see if somebody picks it up and takes it home, because they might. It's one of those things. And Dana Diaz, we're going to run out of time here. It is a pleasure having you here. It really is. And I haven't met you personally, but I'm very proud of you.
Well, thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means to me. That means a lot.
Because you are simply a poster child for how to lead your life and get out of where you were at, recognizing all those things that you had to go through. It is so sad that you had to, but the reality is we all do. That's how it is for a lot of us. And Dr. Marnie has another thing to say. Great book. Sorry you had to experience this, Dana. And but do you know something? And I believe this from the bottom of my heart. Sometimes we experience things in our life and we get through them so that we can become a beacon of hope to somebody who may not be quite as strong, may not be quite as aware. And you can provide that beacon of hope for them so that they too can learn how to live their greatness. It's an art. It's an art form to take. And and that's not to say everything's cupcake and roses. I'm sure that you have a day or two when you're still working through it, but that's life.
That is life. And that's where I tell people, don't be so hard on yourself. You know what? Nobody is perfect, and don't try to be perfect. Just be you. But thank you for saying what you did, because I mean, there's so many people that need to know that we all have something we're going through, but we all have something great inside of us too. And you know, the other part of that, to comment on the doctor as well, is that I do firmly believe the same as you, Kevin. I don't think it was an accident that I was abused as a child, and that I was abused in a marriage, and that strangely I was given, you know, this talent in writing and speaking. And now here I am writing books and being on podcasts, spreading this awareness. I think I had to go through it to really truly experience it so that I could communicate whatever I needed to communicate to the victims and to the people helping them, and be doing what I'm doing. So I'm not sorry that I went through. I mean, I wish things had been different in my past, but I'm glad that my life has led me up to this, because I wouldn't trade where I am right now for anything in the world.
And by the way, if you want to contact Dana, you can email her. Go to her website, which is danasdiaz.com. And if you've got something you'd like to say, if you would like some advice, or if nothing else, she may be able to point you in the right direction of getting some help.
Absolutely. Thank you. And there is a quiz on there that you can take to see if you are in an abusive relationship with a narcissist. And that's not just romantic. It can be a parent, a sibling, a coworker, a friend. They're everywhere.
And the worst kind can be a coworker, can be a friend, can be a sibling. It can be really a destructive thing for your entire life. Dana, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I think we covered a lot. So we'll leave it at that. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you.
You are fantastic, and you're wonderful, and you'll have to come back, because I really want to make a difference for people.
Thank you so much. I will be happy to come back anytime.
way right there. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. We are a production of kmmedia.pro, a full-service media company. Whether it is audio, video, shorts, or longer pieces, we're able to take each project from beginning to final product within your time frame and on budget. Visit kmmedia.pro for more details about us and to get started on your project. We also would like to thank the Brushwood Media Network for all their support. Go to brushwoodmedianetwork.com to find out more about them and the quality shows featured on the network. Until then, we'll see you next time. My name again is Kevin McDonald, and please remember, be kind.